I always thought I had the kind of life people envied. From the outside, it looked perfect. A solid, well-kept house in a quiet suburb, a wife who still turned heads at 52, two grown kids who called on Sundays. I had the job, the pension, the lawn mowed every Saturday like clockwork. Neighbors would nod at me on their evening walks the way they do at men who've earned their place in the world. There goes Dan, they probably thought. Man's got it figured out. But here's the thing about a life that looks perfect. No one asks if it feels that way. Mornings were always the same. Up at 6:15, coffee black, toast lightly buttered. Cheryl would already be dressed, scrolling through her phone at the kitchen island, the glow of the screen reflecting in her glasses. We'd exchange the usual, "Sleep okay? Yeah, you?" But the words had worn thin over the years, like old paint on a porch railing. I'd drive to the office, same route for 22 years, past the same gas station, the same faded billboard. My job was steady, the kind you're supposed to be grateful for in your 50s. But some days, sitting in my cubicle, I'd catch myself staring at the family photo on my desk, all of us smiling at Disney World a decade ago, and wonder when the colors had started to fade. At home, Cheryl and I moved around each other like ghosts. We still shared a bed, still said "I love you" before turning out the lights, but the silence between us had grown heavier, denser. Sometimes I'd watch her reading on the couch, her face half lit by the lamp, and try to remember the last time we'd really talked. Not about the kids, or the bills, or whose turn it was to empty the dishwasher, but about us. The strangest part? No one noticed. Our friends still invited us to barbecues, still called us the perfect couple. Our kids joked about how we'd be the old folks holding hands on the porch someday. And maybe that's what hurt the most, knowing that the world saw a love story, while I stood in the middle of it, feeling like an imposter in my own life. Then, one night, it hit me. I was taking out the trash, the cold air sharp in my lungs, when I saw our bedroom window from the outside. The light was on, Cheryl's silhouette moving behind the curtain, and for the first time, it struck me how far away she seemed. Not just in that moment, but in all of them. I stood there too long, the bag heavy in my hand, realizing something quiet but irreversible. We weren't unhappy. But we weren't happy either, and that somehow was worse. I told myself it was just a bad week, the kind that starts with a flat tire and ends with you staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., counting the cracks like they hold some kind of answer. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The numbness had settled into my bones, heavier than the winter chill creeping through the old windows of our house. Then I found the receipt. It was stuck between the pages of a book Cheryl had been reading, some self-help thing about reclaiming your joy. I wasn't snooping, I was just cleaning up, the way I always did when the silence between us got too loud. The paper was crisp, unfamiliar. A dinner charge from 2 weeks ago at Lucio's, that fancy Italian place downtown. $128. For one. I stood there, holding it between my fingers, the numbers blurring a little. Cheryl hadn't mentioned going out, and she always mentioned things like that, not because she owed me an explanation, but because after 27 years, you just talk about your day. Or you used to. I could have asked her about it. Maybe I should have. But something stopped me. The way her phone buzzed face down on the counter lately, the way she'd started wearing perfume on random Tuesdays. Small things, the kind you don't notice until suddenly you do. That night, I lay beside her in bed, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, trying to match mine to it like I had 1,000 times before. But for the first time, it felt like lying next to a stranger. The space between us wasn't just inches. It was years of unspoken words, of missed chances, of love that had dried up like a puddle in the sun. I thought about the receipt all week, turned it over in my mind like a puzzle piece that wouldn't fit. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. Then, on Friday, I came home early from work. Some bullshit about a power outage in the office. The house was empty, but Cheryl's car was in the driveway. I called her name, my voice echoing off the walls. No answer. That's when I saw it. Her suitcase. Not packed, not shoved in a closet. Just sitting there, half unzipped on the guest bed. A sweater sleeve dangling out like it was waving at me. And next to it, a sticky note with a flight number scribbled in her looping handwriting. No date, no explanation. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. This wasn't a bad week anymore. This was something else. The question wasn't where she was going. It was why I hadn't seen this coming sooner. I started noticing time in strange ways after that. The clock in our bedroom ticked louder, each second stretching like the silence between us. Mornings became something to endure rather than begin. The smell of coffee bitter now, the toast always too dry. Then I found the lottery ticket. It was tucked behind my toolbox in the garage, where I kept old receipts and spare keys. A single $5 scratch-off from months ago, one of those impulse buys at the gas station when Cheryl and I were still pretending to be okay. The expiration date had passed. I almost threw it away, but something made me scratch it off anyway. 3 matching numbers, $100. A laugh caught in my throat, dry and humorless. Of course I'd win now when nothing good could reach me. I turned the ticket over, reading the fine print about second chance drawings for expired winners. The deadline was tomorrow. That night, Cheryl came home late. She didn't mention the suitcase. I didn't mention the ticket. We moved around each other like actors in a play, where neither of us remembered our lines. I lay awake long after she fell asleep, studying the ceiling cracks I'd memorized over the years. The ticket sat on my nightstand, crisp under the glow of the streetlight outside. It felt like a cruel joke, hope showing up only after I'd stopped believing in it. The next morning, I submitted the ticket online before work. Not because I expected to win, but because it was something to do. Some small act of defiance against the numbness. Days passed. Cheryl's suitcase disappeared from the guest room. We didn't talk about it. Then the email came. "Congratulations," it read. "You've been selected as a winner in our second chance drawing." My hands shook as I clicked the details. $4.3 million. The number didn't feel real at first. It was too big, too absurd, the kind of thing that happened to other people. People whose lives weren't quietly unraveling. People who still believed in luck. I closed the laptop and sat there. The hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the house. For the first time in years, I had a secret of my own, and I had no idea what to do with it. The money hit my account on a Tuesday morning. I sat in my car outside the bank for 20 minutes after the deposit cleared, watching the numbers on my phone screen like they might disappear if I blinked too hard. $3.4 million after taxes. Enough to disappear, enough to start over. I should have felt something, elation, relief, even fear. But all I could think about was Cheryl's face when I told her. That's when I noticed the text. Her phone had been buzzing all morning, face up on the kitchen counter while she made coffee. I wasn't trying to look, but the preview was right there. "Can't wait for Friday. This changes everything." The contact name was just initials. JR I knew. Of course I knew. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, holding proof that life could change in an instant, while she was already halfway out the door. I thought about confronting her, about slamming the bank statement down on the counter and watching her face when she realized I'd won, but the anger never came. Just this hollow ache, like I'd swallowed a stone. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I cooked, pot roast the way my mother used to make it. Cheryl paused in the doorway when she smelled it, her keys still in her hand. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said, stirring the gravy. The lies settled between us like dust. We ate in silence, the clink of silverware too loud in the space where conversation should have been. I studied her across the table, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the faint lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when we married. I memorized her like I was saying goodbye. After dinner, I pulled out the bottle of bourbon we'd been saving for a special occasion, poured 2 glasses. Cheryl raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. We sat on the porch, the autumn air sharp with the smell of burning leaves. "Do you remember," I said, staring into my glass, "when we used to talk about buying that cabin up north?" Her fingers tightened around her drink. That was a long time ago. A car passed, headlights cutting through the dark. For a moment, her face was illuminated, and I saw it. Not guilt, not regret, just sadness. The same exhaustion I'd been carrying for years. That's when I understood. She already knew it was over, had probably known longer than I had. I thought about the money in my account, about the text from JR, about all the unspoken things between us piling up like unpaid bills. The question wasn't should I tell her, it was why hadn't either of us said anything sooner? The lawyer's office smelled like leather and expensive coffee. I signed the last page with a hand that didn't shake, surprised at how light I felt watching Cheryl's pen glide across the divorce papers. No fighting over the house, no drawn-out battle for assets. Just two people who'd run out of reasons to stay angry. She kept the home we'd shared for 18 years. I kept the money no one knew I had. For the first month, I drifted, rented a furnished apartment near the beach where the waves sounded like white noise, bought groceries I never cooked, slept through entire afternoons like my body was making up for decades of half sleep. The weight of the lottery win sat in my bank account, unspent, untouched, like a secret too big to unpack. Then I found the postcard. It was stuck between some junk mail, a vintage Florida Keys motel printed in faded blues and pinks. On the back, in handwriting I hadn't seen in 20 years. Heard about the divorce. If you ever want to talk about second acts, I'm here. Maggie. My college girlfriend. The one I'd almost married before Cheryl. I turned the card over and over, tracing the edges gone soft from travel. How had she known? Why now? The questions buzzed in my chest, but beneath them, something warmer. The faintest spark of curiosity about who I might be outside the husk of my old life. That afternoon, I did something reckless. I booked a ticket to Key West. Not to see Maggie. Not yet. But because the idea of going somewhere without ghosts felt like breathing after years underwater. The plane rattled through turbulence, and for the first time in memory, I laughed at the shaking cabin, let go of the armrests, watched the clouds break open beneath us. The Keys smelled like salt and diesel fuel. I rented a convertible on impulse, the wind whipping through what was left of my hair as I drove overseas highway with no destination. Stopped at a roadside bar where the whiskey was cheap and the bartender called me young man with a wink. That's where I met Elena, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, wearing a wedding band but drinking alone. We got talking about the humidity, then Hemingway, then why people our age still bothered pretending. Her husband had died 2 years prior. Cancer, she said, swirling her drink. The slow kind that gives you too much time to say all the wrong things. We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set. Not flirting, not mourning, just two strangers recognizing the same scars. When she left, she pressed a napkin into my hand with her number. For when you remember how to live, she'd written. Back at my rented cottage, I stared at the ceiling fan's lazy circles. The lottery money could have bought me a mansion, but this peeling wallpaper, this lumpy mattress, felt more honest. Like I was finally living inside my own skin instead of performing for someone else's idea of me. I picked up my phone, hesitated, then texted Maggie 3 words. Tell me more. The reply came fast. Still stubborn. Still sentimental. Some things don't change. I smiled for the first time in years and wondered, if I stripped away all the roles I'd played, husband, provider, patient man, who the hell would be left? I didn't go to Maggie right away. Some part of me wanted to hold on to the possibility of her, like keeping a light on in a window I wasn't ready to walk through yet. Instead, I drove north along the coast, the convertible's trunk half full of clothes and half full of hesitation. It was in a sleepy beach town outside Savannah that I found the diner, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee strong enough to put hair on your chest. I sat at the counter flipping through a local real estate magazine just for something to do with my hands. That's when I saw it, a full-page ad for Reynolds & Sons Construction. My throat went dry. There, smiling in a crisp polo shirt, was him, J.R. Jason Reynolds, Cheryl's J.R., the same sharp jawline I'd seen in tagged photos when I'd finally broken down and stalked his Facebook page after the divorce. Below his photo, the company slogan, Building New Beginnings Since 1987. The irony tasted more bitter than the coffee. I must have stared at that page for 10 minutes, tracing the family resemblance I'd never noticed before. The Reynolds nose. the stubborn set of the brow that mirrored my own. The dates lined up, too. Jason would be about 30 now. Old enough to be... Number it couldn't be, but the math didn't lie. Cheryl and I had struggled with infertility for years before finally conceiving our daughter through IVF. All those business trips I'd taken in '92 when the construction industry was booming. The way she'd wept when I surprised her with tickets to Paris that fall, claiming they were happy tears. The waitress refilled my cup, snapping me back. "You all right, sugar? You look like you've seen a ghost." I managed a smile. Just family drama. That night in a cheap motel, I spread the magazine across the scratchy bedspread like a detective piecing together clues. Found Jason's LinkedIn. His college graduation photo, University of Georgia, 2013. His mother listed as Linda Reynolds, but no father mentioned. My hand shook as I pulled up Cheryl's Facebook, scrolled back to 2013. There, half hidden in the background of Jason's graduation photos, was a woman in oversized sunglasses, her blonde hair shorter but unmistakable. Cheryl. The room tilted. All those years, all those lies. The way she'd insisted we never adopt. How she'd mourned our only child status like it was some tragedy rather than her choice. The unexplained withdrawals from our savings around Jason's college years. I thought I'd hit rock bottom after the divorce, but this was the earth giving way beneath me. The worst part? I couldn't even hate her, not completely, because staring at that young man's face, my son's face, I felt something unexpected blooming in the wreckage. Relief. All those years feeling like I'd failed as a father, like something was missing. I hadn't imagined it. The truth had been out there living and breathing, building homes while I'd been dismantling my own. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over Cheryl's number. But what would I say? Did you steal my child? Or maybe the harder question, why did you let me keep believing I was broken? Outside, the ocean roared against the shore, endless, indifferent. I closed the magazine and wondered if some doors once opened could ever truly be shut again. I drove to Cheryl's house in the kind of rain that makes you wonder if the sky knows something you don't. The magazine sat on the passenger seat, Jason's face staring up at me every time I braked too hard. 3 days had passed since I'd found it. 3 days of pacing motel rooms, of drafting speeches in my head that all sounded either too angry or too broken to say out loud. Her porch light was on. She'd always hated the dark. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised to see me, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying secrets too long. "You're soaked," she said, stepping aside to let me in. The house smelled the same. Lemons, and that vanilla candle she loved. Everything in its place except us. I didn't sit. Just pulled the magazine from my jacket and laid it on the coffee table, open to his picture. Watched her face as she registered what it meant. For a moment she didn't move. Then her hand fluttered to her throat, the way it always did when she was nervous. "How long have you known?" The question itself was the confession. I expected rage, demands, a scene worthy of all those years of lies. But what came out was quieter. Was it because we couldn't conceive, or because you didn't want my child? Her breath hitched. It wasn't like that. She sank onto the couch, fingers tracing Jason's photo. His father, the man who raised him, was dying when we met. Cancer. He wanted his son taken care of. And I wanted to know what it felt like to be needed like that. The rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. All those years, all those doctor's appointments where she'd held my hand through yet another negative test, the way she'd cried when I suggested adoption. I thought it was grief. Now I knew it was guilt. "You let me believe I was broken," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Cheryl looked up then, her eyes wet but clear. "You weren't the only one who believed that." And there it was, the truth that undid us both. She hadn't just stolen a child from me. She'd stolen herself from him too. Kept him at arm's length all these years, playing the role of family friend while his real father's money paid his tuition. I thought of Jason's smile in that ad. Confident, self-made. The son I'd never get to call mine. The son she'd never really let herself claim either. We sat in silence for a long time. The rain slowed. Somewhere down the street, a car door slammed. "Are you going to tell him?" she finally asked. I studied her, the woman I'd loved for half my life. The stranger sitting across from me now. "Do you want me to?" She didn't answer. When I stood to leave, she didn't stop me. At the door, I turned back. "You know the cruelest part? I think I would have said yes, if you'd asked me back then." Her lips pressed into a thin line. That's why I didn't. The drive back to the motel was quiet. The magazine stayed on her coffee table, and for the first time in 30 years, I realized the greatest lie wasn't the son she'd hidden from me. It was the love we'd both pretended was enough.